There we go. But yes, let us continue with the Count of Monte Cristo. Chapter 81. The Retired Baker's Room. On the evening of the day when the Comte de Morcerf came away from Danglars with the shame and fury that one can imagine, given the banker's cold reception, Monsieur Andrea Cavalcanti, with his hair curled and shining, his moustaches waxed, and closely fitting white gloves, drove into the banker's courtyard at the Chaussée d'Antin, almost standing upright on his phaeton. After 10 minutes' conversation in the drawing-room, he managed to take Danglars aside into a bay window, and there, after a cleverly worked preamble, spoke about the torments of his existence since the departure of his noble father. Since this departure, he said, the banker had been kind enough to welcome him into his family like a son, and there he had found all those guarantees of happiness that a man ought to look for in preference to the vagaries of passion, though, as far as passion was concerned, he had been fortunate enough to encounter it in the eyes of Mademoiselle Danglars. Danglars listened very closely to this declaration, which he had been expecting for 2 or 3 days. Now that it had come, his eyes shone, just as they had darkened and narrowed while he listened to Morcerf. Even so, he did not want to accept the young man's proposal without making some conscientious observations. "Monsieur Andrea," he said, "aren't you a little young to be thinking of marriage?" "Not at all, monsieur," Cavalcanti replied, "or at least not in my view. In Italy, noblemen generally marry young. It is a reasonable custom. Life is so uncertain that one should grasp happiness as soon as it comes within reach." "Very well, monsieur," said Danglars. "Let us suppose that your proposal, which honours me, is acceptable to my wife and daughter. Then with whom shall we discuss terms? It seems to me that this is an important matter, with which only fathers can properly negotiate in the interests of their children's happiness." "Monsieur, my father is a wise man, possessing much reason and a good sense of propriety. He anticipated that I might well feel some desire to settle in France. So as he was going, he left me, as well as all the papers which confirm my identity, a letter in which he guarantees me an income of 150,000 livres from the day of my marriage onwards, provided I make a choice acceptable to him. As far as I can tell, this is 1/4 of my father's own income." "It was always my intention," Danglars said, "to give my daughter 500,000 francs when I married her. In any event, she is my only heir." "Very well," Andrea said. "As you see, it would be for the best, always assuming that my proposal is not rejected by Madame the Baroness and Mademoiselle Eugénie. This would give us an income of 175,000 livres. Now, let us further suppose that I were to persuade the Marquis that, instead of paying me the income, he were to give me the capital. It will not be easy, I know, but it could be done. Then you would invest these 2 or 3 millions for us, and 2 or 3 millions in skilled hands can bring in a good 10%. "I never take money at more than 4, said the banker, "or even 3.5, but for my son-in-law I would agree to 5, and we could share the profits 50-50. "That's perfect, father-in-law," said Cavalcanti, letting himself be carried away by the slightly vulgar instincts which, despite his efforts, occasionally cracked the aristocratic varnish beneath which he attempted to conceal them. But he had once remembered himself and said, "Oh, please forgive me, monsieur. You see, hope itself is enough to drive me almost mad. What will be the effect of the reality?" "But surely there is a part of your fortune that your father cannot refuse you," said Danglars, not noticing how quickly this conversation, which had started so disinterestedly, had turned to the management of business matters. "What is that?" the young man asked. "Why, the part that comes from your mother." "Ah, yes, indeed, that which comes from my mother, Leonora Corsinari." And what might be the amount of this portion? My goodness, monsieur, said Andrea. I must confess that I've never thought much about it, but I would judge it to be at least 2 million. Danglars felt that suffocating sense of joy that is experienced either by a miser unearthing a lost treasure or by a drowning man whose feet touch solid ground instead of the emptiness that was about to engulf him. Andrea bowed to the banker with warm respect. "Then, monsieur, may I hope—" "Monsieur Andrea," Danglars said, "hope on, and believe that, provided no obstacle from your side halts the progress of the matter, it is signed and sealed." Then he continued thoughtfully, "Why is it that the Count of Monte Cristo, your patron in our Parisian society, did not accompany you to make this request?" Andrea blushed imperceptibly. "I have just come from the Count's, monsieur," he said, "and he is undoubtedly a charming man, but also unbelievably eccentric. He approved of my plan. He even said that he did not think that my father would hesitate for a moment to give me the capital instead of the income, and he promised me to use his influence to that end. But he told me that personally he had never taken on himself, and never would take on, the responsibility of being the bearer of a proposal of marriage. I must grant him this, however. He was kind enough to add that, if he had ever deplored his prejudice in the matter, it was in my case, since he thought that we would be happy and well matched in our union. Moreover, while he does not want to do anything in an official capacity, he told me that he fully expected to answer any of your questions when you wished to discuss them with him." "Ah, that is very good." "And now," Andrea said with his most charming smile, "I should like to turn from the father-in-law to the banker." "And what do you want with him, then?" said Danglars, laughing. "The day after tomorrow I am to draw something like 4,000 francs on your bank, but the Count realized that the coming month might bring an excess of expenditure which would not be covered by my small bachelor's income, so here is a bill for 20,000 francs, which he gave me, more as a present than as a contribution to expenses. It is signed by him, as you see. Will that do?" "Bring me one like this for 1 million, and I'll cash it for you," said Danglars, putting the bill into his pocket. "Give me a time tomorrow, and my cashier will come to you with a bond for 24,000 francs. "At 10 in the morning, then, if you don't mind. The earlier the better. I should like to go to the country tomorrow." "Very well. 10 o'clock, still at the Hôtel de France?" "Yes." The next day, with a punctuality that was a tribute to the banker's conscientiousness, the 24,000 francs were in the young man's hands, and he went out, as he had said, leaving 200 francs for Caderousse. As far as Andrea was concerned, the main aim of this excursion was to avoid meeting his dangerous friend, so he came home as late as possible. But no sooner had he set foot on the flagstones of the courtyard than he found the concierge of the building waiting for him, cap in hand. "Monsieur," he said, "that man called." "What man?" Andrea asked, casually, as if he had forgotten someone whom in fact he remembered only too well. "The man to whom your Excellency gave that little subscription." "Ah, yes," Andrea said, "that former servant of my father's. Well, did you give him the 200 francs I left for him?" "Yes, Excellency." Andrea demanded to be addressed as Excellency. "Just as you said," the concierge went on, "but he refused to take them." Andrea paled, but since it was dark, no one saw the colour drain from his face. "What? He wouldn't take them?" he said, a slight quaver in his voice. "No, he wanted to speak to your Excellency. I told him that you had gone out, but he insisted. Eventually he did seem to let himself be persuaded, and he gave me this letter, which he had brought already sealed. Let me see, said Andrea, and by the lamp on his phaeton he read, You know where I live. I shall expect you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Andrea looked at the seal to see if it had been tampered with, and if any prying eyes could have seen inside the letter. But it was folded in such a way, with so many wafers and overlaps, that it could not have been read without breaking the seal, and this was quite intact. This is very good, he said. Poor man, he's such a fine creature. And he left the concierge to digest these edifying words, not knowing whom he admired the most, the young master or the old retainer. Quickly attend to the horses, then come up and see me, Andrea said to his groom. Then, in 2 bounds, he was inside his room, where he burned Caderousse's letter, even disposing of the ashes. He was just completing this task when the servant came in. Pierre, you're about my size, aren't you? He said. I do have that honour, Excellency, the man answered. You must have fresh livery which was given to you yesterday. Yes, monsieur. I'm involved with a pretty little creature, but I don't want her to know my title or my position. Lend me your livery and your papers so that, if necessary, I can sleep at an inn. Pierre did as he was asked. 5 minutes later, Andrea, completely disguised, left the house without being recognised, took a cab and had himself driven to the inn of the Cheval Rouge in Picpus. The next day he left the inn as he had left the Hôtel de France, that is, unnoticed, followed the boulevard to the Rue Mélimontant, and, stopping at the door of the 3rd house on the left, looked around to see where he could get information, there being no concierge. What are you looking for, love? Asked the woman from the fruiterer's opposite. Monsieur Paletin, if you please, Grandma, Andrea answered. Is it a retired baker? She asked. That's right, the very one. Bottom of the yard, door on the left, 3rd floor. Andrea followed her directions, and on the 3rd floor found a bell pull that he tugged with a feeling of ill temper which communicated itself to the bell. A moment later, Caderousse's face appeared at a grilled spy-hole cut in the door. You're punctual, he said, drawing back the bolts. Damnation, said Andrea, going in and throwing his livery cap ahead of him. It missed the chair, fell to the floor and rolled around the room on its edge. Come, come now, said Caderousse. Don't get angry, dear boy. There now, I thought of you. Just look what a good breakfast we'll have, all things that you like. Breathing in, Andrea could indeed detect the smell of cooking, its gross odours not without charm for a hungry stomach. There was that mixture of fresh oil and garlic which indicates the inferior breed of Provençal cuisine, with additionally a hint of breaded fish, and above all the acrid scent of nutmeg and cloves. All this was exhaled from 2 covered tureens keeping hot on 2 stoves and a dish bubbling in the oven of an iron cooker. In the adjoining room, Andrea also observed a moderately clean table with 2 places laid, 2 bottles of wine, one with a green and the other with a yellow seal, a good measure of spirits in a decanter, and a fruit salad in a large cabbage leaf, artistically displayed on a porcelain dish. What do you think, dear boy? Said Caderousse. Smells good, doesn't it? Ah, by God, I was a good cook in those days. Do you remember how people would lick their fingers? And you most of all. You've tried a few of my sauces and not spat them out, I warrant. And he began to peel some more onions. Yes, yes, we know all that, Andrea said irritably. Ha! If you've brought me all this way just to have lunch, then to hell with you. My son, Caderousse said pompously, as one eats, one may speak. And anyway, you ungrateful boy, aren't you a little pleased to see your old friend? Look, I'm overjoyed. Caderousse was actually weeping, though it was hard to tell whether it was joy or onions that had affected the lachrymal glands of the former innkeeper from the Pont du Gard. "Get away with you, you hypocrite," said Andrea. "Are you that fond of me?" "Yes, indeed I am, or may the devil take me," said Caderousse. "I know it's a weakness on my part, but I can't help it." "And in spite of it, you brought me here for some treachery." Now, Caderousse said, wiping his broad knife on his apron. "If I wasn't fond of you, would I put up with the miserable life you make me lead? Just look around. You are wearing your servant's coat, and that means you have a servant. I have none, so I'm forced to peel my own vegetables. You scoff at my cooking because you dine at the table d'hôte at the Hôtel de France or the Café de Paris. Well, now, I, too, could have a servant. I could have a Tilbury, and I could dine wherever I wished. And why don't I? So as not to cause any distress to my poor Benedetto, that's why. Come on, you must admit that I could, huh?" And Caderousse gave a perfectly clear look to underline his meaning. "Very well, then," said Andrea. "Let's accept that you are fond of me. Then why have you asked me to lunch?" "To see you, of course, dear boy." "Why do you want to see me? We've already agreed on our terms." "Ah, now, dear friend," said Caderousse, "was there ever a will without a codicil? But you came to have lunch first of all, didn't you? So let's sit down and start with these sardines and fresh butter, which I put out on vine leaves especially for you, ungrateful child. I see you're looking around my room. My 4 straw-seated chairs, my pictures at 3 francs apiece. It's not exactly the Hôtel de France here, is it? So you're discontented now, are you? You're not happy any more, yet at one time you asked nothing better than to live like a retired baker." Caderousse sighed, so Andrea continued. "Well, what have you to say? Your dream has come true." "I'll say it's a dream. A retired baker is rich, my dear Benedetto. He has an income." "So do you, by God!" "I do?" "Yes, since I'm bringing 200 francs with me right now." Caderousse shrugged. "It's humiliating," he said, "to get money in this way, money that is given reluctantly. Ephemeral money that may cease between one day and the next. You must see how I am forced to economize, to insure against your prosperity failing one day. Well, my friend, fortune is a fickle jade, as the regimental chaplain said. I know that you're prospering, you rascal. You are going to marry Danglars' daughter." "What? Danglars? Yes, of course, Danglars. Do I have to call him Baron Danglars? It would be like saying Count Benedetto. He's an old friend, Danglars, and if his memory were not so short, he'd be inviting me to your wedding, since he came to mine. Yes, to mine. My God, he wasn't so proud in those days. He was a clerk at good Monsieur Morel's. I've dined more than once with him and the Comte de Morcerf. There, you see what fine friends I have, and if I were to cultivate them a little, we should be meeting in the same drawing-rooms." "Come on now, your jealousy's putting rainbows in your head, Caderousse." "Very well, Benedetto mio, but I know what I'm saying. Perhaps one day we'll put on our Sunday best and go to address some door, 'Bell pull, please.' But until then, sit down and eat." Caderousse set a good example, lunching hungrily and putting in a good word for each dish as he offered it to his guest. The latter seemed to resign himself to making the best of it, bravely uncorking bottles and tucking into the bouillabaisse and the cod in breadcrumbs with garlic and oil. "There now, mate," said Caderousse, "you seem to be reconciled with your old landlord." "Yes, I suppose so. Andrea replied, his youthful and vigorous appetite taking precedence at that moment over everything. "Are you enjoying it, you rogue?" "So much so that I can't understand how a man who can fry and eat such good things can possibly be disillusioned with life." "Well, now," said Caderousse, "the trouble is that all my happiness is ruined by a single thought." "What can that be?" "That I am living at the expense of a friend, when I have always sturdily struggled to earn my own bread." "Oh, don't fret over that," said Andrea. "I've got plenty for two, don't you worry." No, it's the truth. Believe me or not, but at the end of every month I feel guilty." "My dear Caderousse!" "So much so that yesterday I didn't want to take the 200 francs. "Yes, you wanted to talk about it, but did you really feel guilty then?" "Really? And then I had an idea." Andrea shuddered. He always shuddered at Caderousse's ideas. "It's a miserable business," Caderousse went on, "always having to wait until the end of the month." Andrea shrugged philosophically, deciding to see where this was leading. "Isn't life spent waiting?" he asked. "Look at me, what do I do but wait? Well, I'm patient, aren't I?" "Yes, because instead of waiting for 200 miserable francs, you are waiting for 5,000 or 6,000, perhaps 10 or even 12. You're a sly one, you are. Even in the old days, you always had your little purses or money boxes that you tried to hide from your poor friend Caderousse. Luckily, the said Caderousse had a way of sniffing them out." "There you go again, wandering off the subject and turning the past over and over. I ask you, what's the use of harping on like that?" "Oh, you say that because you're 21. You can forget the past. I'm 50 and obliged to remember it. But no matter, let's get back to business." "Yes, let's." "I was saying that in your place—" "What?" "I should cash in—" "What, you'd cash in—" "Yes, I'd ask for a 6-month advance on the grounds that I wanted to go into politics and I was going to buy a farm. Then once I had the money, I'd be off." Well, said Andrea. "That's perhaps not such a bad idea after all." "My dear friend," said Caderousse, "eat my cooking and digest my words. You won't be any the worse for it, physically or otherwise." "Well, in that case," said Andrea, "why don't you take your own advice? Why not cash in a half year, or even a whole one, and retire to Brussels? Instead of looking like a retired baker, you would seem like a fully active bankrupt. That's a step up." "And how the devil do you expect me to retire on 1,200 francs? "Now then, Caderousse," said Andrea, "you're getting fussy. 2 months ago you were starving to death." "The more you eat," said Caderousse, baring his teeth like a laughing monkey or a growling tiger, "the more you want. Moreover, I've got a plan," he added, biting off a huge mouthful of bread with those same teeth, which were sharp and white, despite the man's age. Caderousse's plans terrified Andrea even more than his ideas. The ideas were only the seed. The plan was the full fruit. "Tell us this plan," he said. "It must be a good one." "Why not? Who had the plan that got us out of Monsieur Thingamy's place? I did, it goes without saying. And it wasn't a bad plan after all, since we're both here." "I'm not denying it," said Andrea. "You do sometimes have a good one. So let's hear it." "In that case," Caderousse continued, "can you, without paying a sou, get me 15,000 francs? No, 15,000 is not enough. I don't want to become an honest man for less than 30,000. "No," Andrea replied dryly. "I can't." "I don't think you can have understood me," Caderousse replied coldly and calmly. "I said without paying a sou." "I suppose you're not asking me to steal so that I can ruin everything for myself and you with me and have both of us taken back where we came from?" "Oh, as far as I'm concerned," said Caderousse, "I don't mind either way if I'm caught. I'm an odd fish, you know. I sometimes miss the company. I'm not heartless like you, happy if you never see your old friends again." This time Andrea did more than shudder. He went pale. "Come now, Caderousse," he said. "Don't do anything foolish." "Don't worry, I won't, my little Benedetto. Just show me the means to make 30,000 francs. You don't have to be involved. Just let me get on with it." "All right, I'll see. I'll look for something," said Andrea. "Meanwhile, you can increase my allowance to 500 francs a month. I've got this idea in my head that I'd like a maid." "Very well, you shall have your 500, said Andrea. "But it's not going to be easy for me, Caderousse. You're starting to take advantage." "Ha!" said Caderousse. "You get it from a bottomless chest." Andrea seemed to be expecting this, because his eye shone with a brief flame, though one that was immediately extinguished. "That's true," he replied. "My protector is very good to me." "Your dear protector," said Caderousse. "How much does he give you every month?" 5,000 francs. 1,000 for every 100 you will be giving me," Caderousse said. "As they say, only bastards know real good fortune. 5,000 francs a month. What the devil can you do with it all?" "Believe me, it soon goes. So, like you, I would prefer a lump sum." "A lump sum. Yes, I understand. Everyone would like a lump sum." "And I'm going to get one." "Who will give it to you, then? Your prince?" "Yes, my prince, but unfortunately I have to wait." "What for?" asked Caderousse. "His death." "Your prince's death?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because he has provided for me in his will." "Is that so?" "On my word." "How much?" 500,000. "Is that all? Thanks a lot." "I'm telling the truth." "Come on, it's impossible." "Caderousse, are you my friend?" "Of course, in life to the death." "I'm going to tell you a secret." "Ooh, go on." "Listen, then." "Right, then, not a word." "Well, I think—" Andrea stopped and looked around. "You think?" "Don't worry, we're alone." "I think I have found my father." "Your real father?" "Yes." "Not Father Cavalcanti?" "No. Anyway, he's gone. No, the real one." "Who is it?" "Caderousse, it's the Count of Monte Cristo." "Huh?" "Yes. Don't you see, it explains everything. Apparently he cannot admit to me openly, but he has had me recognized by Monsieur Cavalcanti and given him 50,000 francs for doing so." 50,000 francs to be your father? I would have done it for half as much. Or even for 20. No, 15. Why didn't you think of me, ungrateful wretch?" "How did I know, since it all happened while we were inside?" "So it did. And you say that in his will he leaves me 500,000 livres. Are you sure?" "He showed it to me. But that's not all. There is a codicil, as I just said." "Probably." "And in it he acknowledges me." "Oh, what a good father, a fine father, a most excellent father," Caderousse said, twirling a plate in the air between his hands. "Now tell me that I keep any secrets from you." "No, and in my view your trusting nature does you credit. And this prince of fathers, is he rich? Ultra rich?" "I think so. He doesn't know his own wealth." "I can't believe it." "Damn it, I can see as much, since I am admitted to his house at all hours. The other day, a boy came from the bank with 50,000 francs in a portfolio as big as your briefcase. Yesterday, a banker brought in 100,000 francs in gold." Caderousse was stunned. It seemed to him that the young man's words rang like metal, and he could hear showers of golden coins. "And you go into that house?" he exclaimed naively. "Whenever I want." Caderousse reflected for a moment. It was easy to see that his mind was turning over some deep thought. Then suddenly he exclaimed, "Wouldn't I love to see all that? It must be lovely." "In fact, it's magnificent," Andrea said. "Doesn't he live in the Avenue des Champs-Élysées?" "At number 30. "Ah, number 30, said Caderousse. "Yes, a fine house, standing alone in its own grounds, which is all you can see." "Perhaps, but it's not the outside that interests me, it's indoors. There must be some fine furniture, huh?" "Have you ever seen the Tuileries?" "No." "Well, this is better. Tell me, Andrea, when this good Monte Cristo drops his purse, it must be worth stooping to pick it up." "Oh, heavens, no need to wait for that," said Andrea. "Money lies around in that house like fruit in an orchard." "Oh, now you really should take me there one day." "How can I? As whom?" You're right, but you've made my mouth water. I really must see it." "I'll find a way." "Don't do anything silly, Caderousse." "I'll introduce myself as a polisher. They have carpets everywhere." "Oh, that's a pity. I'll just have to imagine it." "Believe me, that's the best way." "At least help me to guess what it must be like." "How can I do that?" "Nothing simpler. Is it big?" "Neither too large nor too small." "What is the general layout?" "Hell, I'd need ink and paper to draw a plan for you." "Here you are," Caderousse said at once, going over to his writing desk to fetch some white paper, ink and a quill. "There, now, put it all down on paper, my lad." Andrea took the pen with a faint smile and began. "As I told you, the house is in its own grounds. Do you see? Like this." He drew the outline of the garden, the courtyard, and the house. "High walls?" "No, 8 or 10 feet at most." "That's risky," said Caderousse. "In the courtyard, tubs for orange trees, lawns and flower beds." "Any man traps?" "No." "And the stables?" "On either side of the fence, you see. There." Andrea went on with his plan. Let's see the ground floor," said Caderousse. "On the ground floor, there's a dining room, 2 drawing rooms, a billiard room, a stairway from the hall, and a little hidden staircase." "Windows?" "Splendid windows, so beautiful and so wide that I honestly do believe a man of your size could climb through a single pane." "Why on earth do they have stairways with such windows?" "What do you think? Extravagance." But there are shutters?" "Yes, there are, but they're never used. He's eccentric, this Count of Monte Cristo, and likes to see the sky, even at night." "So where do the servants sleep, then?" "Oh, they have their own house. Picture a fine storeroom on the right as you go in, where they keep the ladders. Well, on top of that there is a collection of rooms for the servants, with bells corresponding to the rooms." "Hell's bells!" "What was that?" Oh, nothing. I was just saying that they're expensive to install, bells. And what use are they, I ask you? At one time there was a dog which used to walk around the courtyard at night, but they've taken him to the house in Auteuil. You know, the one you visited. Yes. And I was saying only yesterday, it is unwise of you, Monsieur le Comte, because when you go to Auteuil and take your servants, the house remains empty. What about it? He asked. What about it? Well, one day someone will burgle you. What did he say to that? What did he say? Yes. What he said was, what if I am burgled? Andrea, he must have some mechanical bureau. What do you mean? Yes, something that traps the thief in a cage and plays a tune. I'm told there was something of the sort at the last exhibition. He just has a walnut bureau, and I've always seen the key in it. And no one steals from it? No, his servants are all devoted to him. Oh, there must be something inside that bureau, mustn't there? Coin? Perhaps. There's no way of telling. And where is it? On the first floor. So, make me a plan of the first floor, dear boy, as you did of the ground floor. That's easy. Andrea took the pen. On the first floor, as you see, there's an anteroom, a drawing room, then on the right of that a library and a study, while on the left we have a bedroom and a dressing room. The famous bureau is in the dressing room. Is there a window in this dressing room? 2. One here and one here. Andrea drew 2 windows in the room, which, on the plan, stood in a corner of the house, like a shorter rectangle joined to the long rectangle of the bedroom. Caderousse was deep in thought. So, does he often go to Auteuil? He asked. 2 or 3 times a week. Tomorrow, for example, he is due to spend the day and the following night there. Are you sure? He invited me to dinner. Wonderful. That's the way to live, said Caderousse. A house in town, a house in the country. That's what it means to be rich. And will you go to dinner? Probably. When you dine there, do you stay the night? If I want to. I'm quite at home in the Count's house. Caderousse looked at the young man as if to tear the truth from the depths of his heart, but Andrea took a cigar case out of his pocket, extracted a Havana, calmly lit it, and began to smoke with an entirely natural air. When would you like the 500 francs? He asked. Straight away, if you have them. Andrea took 25 louis out of his pocket. Gold coins? Said Caderousse. No thanks. Why not? Do you despise them? On the contrary, I have a high regard for them, but I don't want any. You'll gain on the exchange, idiot. Gold is worth 5 sous. That's right, and then the dealer will have your friend Caderousse followed, a hand will fall on his shoulder, and he'll have to explain who these farmers are paying him his fees in gold coin. Let's not be silly, dear boy. Just give me my money, round coins with the head of some monarch or other. Anyone can come by a 5-franc coin. You must realize I don't have 500 on me. I would have needed to bring a broker with me to carry it. In that case, leave it with your concierge. He's a good man. I'll come and pick it up. Today? Tomorrow. I won't have time today. As you say, then. Tomorrow, as I'm setting out for Auteuil, I'll leave them for you. Can I count on it? Absolutely. Because I'm going to hire my maid in advance. Do it. But that will be the end, won't it? You won't torment me any longer? Never again. Caderousse had become so moody that Andrea was afraid he might be obliged to notice the change, so he pretended to be even merrier and more insouciant. You're full of beans, Caderousse said. Anyone would think you'd already come into your inheritance. No, alas, but the day when I do... What? I'll remember my friends. I'll say no more. Yes, and you have such a good memory, too. What do you expect? I thought you wanted to turn me in for the reward. Me? What an idea! On the contrary, as a friend, I'm going to give you another piece of advice. Which is? To leave the diamond you've got on your finger here. I never. Do you want us to be caught? Do you want to do for the pair of us with such idiocies? How do you mean? Andrea asked. What, you put on livery to disguise yourself as a servant, yet you keep a diamond worth 4,000 or 5,000 francs on your finger. Well, I'll be damned. That's a good estimate. You should be an auctioneer. I know about diamonds. I used to have some. I advise you to not boast about it, said Andrea, and without losing his temper, as Caderousse had feared he might at this new piece of extortion, quietly handed over the ring. Caderousse examined it so closely that Andrea realized he was looking to see if the edges of the cut sparkled. It's a fake, said Caderousse. Come, said Andrea. You must be joking. Oh, don't worry about it. We'll soon see. He went across to the window and ran the diamond across the pane. The glass screeched. Confiteor, Caderousse said, slipping the ring on his little finger. I was wrong, but those thieving jewellers are so clever at imitating stones that one no longer dares to go and steal from one of their shops. That's another branch of the industry paralysed. Well, is that it? Andrea said. Do you have anything else to ask me? Don't hesitate while I'm here. No, you're a good fellow underneath. I won't keep you any longer, and I'll try to cure myself of my ambition. But be careful that the same doesn't happen when you sell the diamond as you feared might happen with the gold. Ah, no, I shan't sell it. Don't worry. No, not between now and the day after tomorrow, at least, the young man thought. You lucky devil, said Caderousse. You're going back to your lackeys, your horses, your carriage, and your fiancée. So I am, said Andrea. Here, I hope you'll make me a good wedding present the day you marry the daughter of my friend Danglars. I told you that's some nonsense you've dreamed up. What kind of dowry? I told you already. 1,000,000? Andrea shrugged his shoulders. Let's say 1,000,000, said Caderousse. You'll never have as much as I'd wish for you. Thank you, said the young man. Don't mention it, Caderousse said, giving a raucous laugh. Wait, I'll show you the way out. Don't bother. I must. Why? Because there's a little secret on the door. A precautionary measure that I thought I should take. A lock by Huret et Fichet, specially adapted by Gaspard Caderousse. When you're a capitalist, I'll make you one. Thank you, said Andrea. I'll give you a week's notice. They took their leave of one another. Caderousse remained on the landing until he had seen Andrea go down the 3 flights and also cross the courtyard. Only then did he hurry back inside, carefully shutting the door, and, like a practiced architect, started to study the plan that Andrea had left him. Dear Benedetto, he said, I don't think he'll be sorry to inherit, and the person who brings the day closer when he is to get his hands on 500,000 francs will not be his worst enemy either. And I think there we shall take a break. Just because I saw it was asked by Lynn. Those are... so Caderousse is sort of one of the original people. He was like the... What was he? He was a tavern keeper, innkeeper, whatever. Back when... he was basically one of the original 3, so it's Caderousse, Danglars, and Fernand, who were the ones who sort of conspired to put Dantes, aka Count of Monte Cristo, into jail. Caderousse was not as guilty, kind of. He was sort of standing by. But he is, as you can probably tell, a little bit greedy. So this is him and Benedetto, who is the I think Benedetto. Oh god, there's so many characters. I think Benedetto is the he's the son of someone. Anyway, but Benedetto basically has been hired by the Count of Monte Cristo to pretend to be Count Andrea Cavalcanti, basically in order to ruin Danglars, pretty much. So yeah, Caderousse is one of the OG conspirators against Dantes, and will probably get his comeuppance soon, probably by breaking into Dantes's house and then like getting arrested or something. I don't know, it's probably more complicated than that. I hope that sort of explains things a little bit. There are a lot of characters, it gets a bit confusing. But anyway, we shall go and take a break. You go all have good break, that was a sentence, and we'll see you back in about 5 minutes. Bye for now. we're back. Hello. I hope everybody had a good break, did breaky things. Don't break things, but, did break things. Not that kind of breaking. I'm doing well already. This is great. Yeah. I hope everybody's doing well. Also, hello to people who had dropped in when I was reading. Hello to Sil. Hello to Raytracer. Hello to Diana. And thank you very much, Diana, for the gift sub to... what was it? I don't think... is it Auntie Julie? Ah, there we go. I was just like, Auntie Julie. But yes, thank you all. You're all wonderful. Yeah. So you know how they were talking about burglary? Well, the next chapter... I'm just going to carry on. The next chapter is... Chapter 82, Breaking and Entering. The day after the conversation that we have just recorded, the Count of Monte Cristo did indeed leave for Artois, with Ali, several servants, and some horses which he wanted to try out. The main reason for his departure, which he had not even considered on the previous day, and about which Andrea knew no more than he did, was the arrival of Bertuccio, who had come back from Normandy with news about the house and the boat. The house was ready, and the corvette, delivered a week before and anchored in a small bay where it remained with its 6-man crew, after completing all the necessary formalities, was already fully prepared to set sail. The Count praised Bertuccio's fine efforts and told him to stand by to depart soon, since he did not intend to stay longer than a month in France. "Now," he said, "I may need to go in a single night from Paris to Tréport. I want 8 relays at intervals along the route which will allow me to cover 50 leagues in 10 hours. "Your Excellency already expressed that desire," Bertuccio replied, "and the horses are ready. I bought them and stationed them at the most convenient points, that is to say in villages where normally no one stops." "That's very good," said Monte Cristo. "I shall be staying here a day or two, so do whatever you need to." As Bertuccio was going out to order everything necessary for this stay, Baptistin opened the door. He was carrying a letter on a gilt bronze tray. "What are you doing here?" the Count asked, seeing him covered in dust. "I don't think I called for you, did I?" Without replying, Baptistin went over to the Count and gave him the letter. "Urgent and in haste," he said. The Count opened it and read, "Monsieur de Monte Cristo is warned that tonight a man will break into his house in the Champs-Élysées in order to purloin some papers that he believes to be hidden in the bureau in the dressing-room. The Count of Monte Cristo is known to be brave enough not to turn for help to the police, whose involvement might seriously compromise the person who is giving this warning. Monsieur le Comte can administer his own justice, either by entering the dressing-room or through an opening from the bedroom, or by lying in wait in the dressing-room. A lot of people and obvious precautions would surely scare away the burglar and deprive the Count of this opportunity to discover an enemy who became known by chance to the writer of this warning, a warning which he may not have the opportunity to repeat if this first attempt should fail and the wrongdoer attempt another." The Count's first impulse was to think that this must be a thieves' trick, a crude trap warning him of a slight danger in order to expose him to a more serious one, so he was going to have the letter taken to a police commissioner, despite, or perhaps because of, the instruction from his anonymous friend, when he suddenly thought that there might in fact be some enemy peculiar to him, whom he alone could recognize, and in that event take advantage of him as Fiesco did of the Moor who tried to assassinate him. The reader knows the Count, so there is no need to mention that he was athletic and daring, and that his mind rebelled against the impossible with that energy peculiar to superior beings. Because of the kind of life he had led, and because of the resolve he had made, and kept, not to shrink from anything, the Count had managed to enjoy unknown pleasures in the struggle against nature, which is God, and against the world, which is, near enough, the devil. "They don't want to steal my papers," Monte Cristo said. "They want to kill me. These are not thieves, but murderers. I do not want the prefect of police to meddle with my private affairs. Why, I am rich enough to cover the entire budget of his force." The Count recalled Baptistin, who had left the room after bringing the letter. "Go back to Paris," he told him, "and bring all the remaining servants here. I need everyone in Auteuil." "But will no one be left in the house, Monsieur le Comte?" Baptistin asked. "Yes, there will. The concierge." "Monsieur le Comte will reflect that it is a long way from the porter's lodge to the house." "Well?" "Well, the whole house could be burgled and no one hear a sound." "Who would do that?" "Why, thieves." "You are an idiot, Monsieur Baptistin. If thieves were to ransack the whole house, they would not cause me as much displeasure as a service poorly carried out." Baptistin bowed. "You heard me," said the Count. "Take your fellow servants from the first to the last, and leave everything in its usual state. Close the ground floor windows, that's all." "And those on the first floor?" "You know that they are never closed. Now go." The Count gave instructions that he would dine alone, and wished to be served only by Ali. He dined with his usual calm and sobriety, and after dinner, motioning to Ali to follow him, he left by the side door, went to the Bois de Boulogne as though going for a walk, unobtrusively took the road for Paris, and by nightfall was standing in front of his house in the Champs-Élysées. Everything was dark, except for a faint light burning in the porter's lodge, which, as Baptistin had said, was some 40 yards from the house. Monte Cristo leant against a tree, and with an eye that was rarely deceived, tested the double pathway, examined the passers-by, and looked up and down the neighbouring streets to see if anyone was waiting in ambush. After 10 minutes he was convinced that no one was waiting for him. He at once ran to the little side door with Ali, hurried in, and using his key to the back stairs, reached his bedroom without opening or stirring a single curtain, so that the concierge himself could not have guessed that the house, which he thought to be empty, was once more occupied by its principal inhabitant. When he got to the bedroom, the Count signalled to Ali to stop there, then went into the dressing-room, which he examined. Everything was in its usual state. The precious bureau was in its place and the key in the bureau. He double-locked it, took the key, came back to the bedroom door, removed the double tumbler on the bolt, and returned. Meanwhile, Ali had laid out on a table the weapons which the Count had asked for, a short carbine and a pair of double pistols with superimposed barrels that allowed the user to aim as accurately as with a target pistol. Thus armed, the Count held the lives of 5 men in his hands. It was about 9:30. The Count and Ali quickly ate a piece of bread and drank a glass of Spanish wine. Then Monte Cristo slid back one of the moving panels that allowed him to see from one room into the next. His pistols and his carbine were within reach, and Ali, beside him, held one of those little Arab axes that have not changed in design since the Crusades. Through one of the bedroom windows, parallel to that in the dressing-room, the Count could see into the street. 2 hours passed in this way. It was completely dark, and yet, through this darkness, Ali and the Count, no doubt thanks to an acquired ability, could distinguish even the slightest rustle of the trees in the courtyard. The little light in the porter's lodge had long since been extinguished. Presumably the attack, if one was really planned, would take place by the staircase from the ground floor and not through a window. In Monte Cristo's mind, the criminals were after his life, not his money, so they would attack the bedroom, reaching it either by the hidden staircase or through the dressing-room window. He placed Ali in front of the door to the staircase and continued his own watch on the dressing-room. 11:15 rang on the Invalides clock, the west wind carrying the dreary resonance of the 3 blows on its moist breath. As the last one faded, the Count thought he could hear a faint noise from the dressing room. This first sound, to be precise, this first scraping sound, was followed by another, then a third. At the 4th, the Count knew what was going on. A firm and skilled hand was engaged in cutting the 4 sides of a window pane with a diamond. The Count felt his heart beat faster. However much a man is inured to taking risks, however well prepared he is for danger, the fluttering of his heart and the pricking of his skin will always let him know the vast difference that lies between dream and reality, planning and execution. However, Monte Cristo only made a sign to alert Ali, and the latter, realizing that the danger came from the direction of the dressing room, stepped over closer to his master. Monte Cristo was anxious to know what enemies and how many he had to deal with. The window that was the object of attention was opposite the opening through which the Count had been staring into the dressing room. His eyes consequently focused on this window. He could see a thicker shadow against the darkness. Then one of the panes became entirely opaque, as if a sheet of paper had been stuck onto it from outside, and the glass cracked without falling. Through the opening a hand groped for the catch. A second later the window was opening on its hinges, and a man entered. The man was alone. "Here's a bold scoundrel," the Count muttered. At that moment he felt Ali touch his shoulder. He turned around. Ali was pointing to the window of the room where they were, which looked out onto the street. Knowing the superb delicacy of his faithful servant's senses, Monte Cristo went across to the window, and there saw another man emerging from the shelter of a doorway and climbing on a boundary stone, apparently so that he could see what was happening in the Count's house. "So," he said, "there are 2 of them, one to act, the other to keep watch." He motioned to Ali to keep his eyes on the man in the street, and returned to the one in the dressing room. The glass cutter had got inside and was taking his bearings, his arms extended in front of him. Finally he appeared to have understood everything. There were 2 doors in the dressing room. He bolted each of them. When he came across to the door into the bedroom, Monte Cristo thought he was about to enter, and raised one of the pistols, but he heard simply the noise of the bolts sliding in their bronze rings. It was merely a precaution. The nocturnal visitor, not realizing the care with which the Count had removed the tumblers, could now consider himself at home and in safety. Alone and free to act, the man now took something out of his pocket, which the Count could not make out in the darkness, put it on a small table, then went directly over to the bureau and felt around the lock, only to find that, contrary to his expectations, the key was not in place. But the glass cutter was a resourceful fellow who had made provision for every eventuality. The Count soon heard the clink of iron on iron made by the rustling of that bunch of shapeless keys that locksmiths bring when you call for them to open a door, and which thieves call skeleton keys, or, if they are French thieves, rossignols, which means nightingales, no doubt because of the pleasure they experience on listening to their nocturnal song when they grate against the bolt of a lock. Oh, Monte Cristo murmured with a disappointed smile. "It's only a thief." But the man in the darkness could not find the right key, so he reached for the object which he had placed on the table, and worked a spring. At once a pale light, though bright enough to see by, cast a golden hue across the man's hands and face. "Well, I never," said Monte Cristo, starting back in surprise. "It's—" Ali raised his axe. "Don't move," the Count whispered, and leave your axe here. We won't need to be armed." He added a few more words in an even lower voice, because, stifled though it had been, the Count's involuntary exclamation of surprise had been enough to startle the man, who had remained in the pose of the antique knife grinder. What the Count had said to Ali was an order, because he at once tiptoed away and took down a black cloak and a three-cornered hat from the wall of the alcove. Meanwhile, Monte Cristo rapidly removed his frock coat, his waistcoat, and his shirt. Now, by the ray of light glowing through the hole in the panelling, you could see that the Count was wearing on his chest one of those finely woven and pliable tunics of mail. In a France where people are no longer afraid of being knifed, the last person to wear one of these was probably Louis XVI, who did fear a dagger in his chest, but died from an axe to the head. The mail coat soon vanished under a long soutane, as the Count's hair did under a tonsured wig. The triangular hat on top of the wig completed the Count's transformation into an abbé. Meanwhile, the man had heard nothing more, so he got up, and, while Monte Cristo was changing his appearance, went back to the bureau and began to crack the lock with his nightingale. "Very well," the Count muttered, doubtless aware of some secret of the locksmith's art unknown to the lockpick, skilled though he was. "You'll be at it for a few minutes." And he went to the window. The man whom he had seen climb onto a boundary stone had got down and was still walking up and down in the street, but oddly, instead of watching for anyone who might come, either along the Avenue des Champs-Élysées or down the Faubourg Saint-Honoré, he appeared to be concerned only with what was happening at the Count's. All his movements were designed to let him see what was going on in the dressing-room. Suddenly Monte Cristo struck his forehead and allowed a silent laugh to play across his lips. Then he went over to Ali and whispered, "Stay here, hiding in the dark, and whatever noise you may hear or whatever may happen, do not come in and show yourself unless I call you by name." Ali nodded to show that he had heard and that he would obey. At this, Monte Cristo took a ready-lighted candle out of a cupboard, and at the moment when the thief was concentrating most attentively on his lock, quietly opened the door, making sure that the light in his hand completely illuminated his face. The door opened so quietly that the thief did not hear it, but, to his amazement, he suddenly saw the room light up. He swung around. "Well, good evening, dear Monsieur Caderousse," Monte Cristo said. "What the devil are you doing here at this hour?" "Abbé Busoni!" cried Caderousse, and, quite at a loss to explain how this strange apparition had reached him since he had locked the doors, he dropped his bunch of skeleton keys and remained motionless, as though struck dumb with astonishment. The Count stepped between Caderousse and the window, cutting the terrified thief off from his only route of escape. "Abbé Busoni!" Caderousse repeated, staring at the Count in horror. "Yes, indeed, Abbé Busoni," Monte Cristo went on, "in person, and I am glad that you recognized me, Monsieur Caderousse, because it shows you have a good memory. If I'm not mistaken, it's nearly 10 years since we met." This calm, this irony, this power filled Caderousse with a dizzying sense of terror. The abbé, he muttered, his hands clasped and his teeth chattering. "So, are we trying to rob the Count of Monte Cristo?" asked the counterfeit abbé. Monsieur l'abbé," Caderousse muttered, trying to reach the window while the Count pitilessly barred his way. Father, I don't know. Please believe me, I swear that—" "A broken window pane," the Count went on, "a dark lantern, a bunch of skeleton keys, a lock half forced. It seems clear enough." Caderousse was knotting his cravat around his neck, looking for a corner to hide in or a hole down which he might vanish. "Come now," said the Count. I see you have not changed, my fine murderer. Monsieur l'Abbé, as you seem to know everything, you must know that it was not me, it was La Carconte. That was acknowledged at the trial, since they only sentenced me to the galleys. So did you serve your time, since here you are trying to have yourself sent back for another term? No, father, someone released me. Whoever it was did society a rare favour. Ah, said Caderousse, but I did promise. So you're breaking your parole? Monte Cristo interrupted. Alas, yes, said Caderousse, deeply unsure of himself. An unfortunate lapse which, if I'm not mistaken, will lead you to the block. Too bad, diavolo, as worldly folk say in my country. Father, I gave way to temptation. All criminals say that. And necessity. Spare me that, Busoni said with contempt. Necessity may make a man beg for alms or steal a loaf at the baker's door, but not come and crack the lock of a bureau in a house that he thinks is uninhabited. When the jeweller Joannes had just paid you 45,000 francs in exchange for the diamond that I gave you, and you killed him so that you could have both the diamond and the money, was that also necessity? Forgive me, Monsieur l'Abbé, said Caderousse. You saved me once. Save me a second time. I'm not tempted to. Are you alone, father? Caderousse asked, clasping his hands. Or do you have the police waiting, ready to take me in? I am entirely alone, said the abbé, and I still feel pity for you. I shall let you go, at the risk of whatever new misfortune my weakness may bring, if you tell me the whole truth. Oh, Monsieur l'Abbé, Caderousse cried, clasping his hands and coming towards the Count. I can tell you, you are my saviour. You claim you were released from hard labour? Oh, yes, father, I swear on my honour. Who did that? An Englishman. What was his name? Lord Wilmore. Ah, I know him, so I shall know if you are lying. Monsieur l'Abbé, I am telling you the absolute truth. So this Englishman protected you? Not me, but a young Corsican who was my fellow convict. What was this Corsican's name? Benedetto. That's a Christian name. He had no other. He was a foundling. So the young man escaped with you? Yes. How? We were working at Saint-Mondrier near Toulon. Do you know Saint-Mondrier? I do. Well, while we were sleeping from 12 to 1, convicts taking a siesta. Poor creatures, said the abbé. Damn it, said Caderousse. No one can work all the time. We are not dogs. Fortunately for dogs, said Monte Cristo. So, while the others were taking a siesta, we went a little way off, sawed through our leg irons with a file that the Englishman had got to us, and escaped by swimming. What became of this Benedetto? I have no idea. But you must know. Truly, I don't. We parted company at Iré. And to give more force to his words, Caderousse took another step towards the abbé, who remained calm and questioning, not moving from the spot. You are lying, Abbé Busoni said, in tones of unmistakable authority. Monsieur l'Abbé, you are lying. The man is still your friend, and perhaps you may even be using him as your accomplice. Oh, Monsieur l'Abbé, how have you managed to survive since you left Toulon? Answer me. As best I could. You're lying, the abbé said for the third time, in an even more compelling voice. Caderousse looked at him in terror. You have been living on the money he has given you, the Count continued. Yes, it's true, said Caderousse. Benedetto became the son of a great nobleman. How can he be the son of a great nobleman? The illegitimate son. And what is this nobleman's name? The Count of Monte Cristo, the same in whose house we are. Benedetto is the Count's son? Monte Cristo asked, astonished in his turn. By God, he must be, since the Count has found him a false parent. The Count gives him 40,000 francs a month, and the Count is leaving him 500,000 francs in his will. Ah, said the fake abbé, starting to understand. And what name is this young man using in the meantime? He is called Andrea Cavalcanti. So he is the young man whom my friend, the Count of Monte Cristo, receives in his home, and who is engaged to Mademoiselle Danglars. The very same. And you would allow this, you wretch, knowing his life and his crimes? Why should I stand in the way of a comrade's success? You are right. It is not your place to warn Monsieur Danglars, but mine. Oh, don't do that, father. Why not? Because you would lose us our living. Do you think that in order to ensure a living for wretches like you, I should become a party to their deception and an accomplice in their crime? Monsieur l'Abbé, Caderousse said, coming still closer, I shall tell everything. To whom? To Monsieur Danglars. By the devil and all his works, cried Caderousse, taking an open knife from under his coat and striking the Count full in the chest. You will say nothing, Abbé. To his great astonishment, instead of burying itself in the Count's chest, the dagger glanced off, blunted. At the same time, the Count grasped the murderer's wrist in his left hand and twisted it with such force that the knife fell from his numbed fingers, and Caderousse gave a cry of pain. But instead of stopping at this cry, the Count continued to twist the bandit's wrist until he fell to the ground, at first on his knees, then face downwards, his arm dislocated. The Count put his foot on the man's head and said, I don't know what is stopping me from breaking your head, scoundrel. Mercy! Mercy! Cried Caderousse. The Count took away his foot. Get up, he said. Caderousse did as he was told. Begorra, what a grip you have, father, he said, rubbing an arm bruised by the sinewy vice that had gripped it. By God, what a grip! Be quiet. God gives me the strength to tame a wild beast like yourself. I act in his name. Remember that, wretch. Sparing you at this moment is also in accordance with the will of God. Ouch, said Caderousse, still in pain. Take this pen and paper and write what I tell you. I can't write, Monsieur l'Abbé. You are lying. Take the pen and write. Caderousse, overwhelmed by this superior power, sat down and wrote. Monsieur, the man whom you are receiving in your house, and to whom you intend to give your daughter's hand, is a former convict, who escaped with me from the prison at Toulon. His number was 59, and mine 58. He was called Benedetto, but he does not himself know his real name, having never known his parents. Sign, the Count ordered. But do you want to ruin me? If I wanted to ruin you, idiot, I should take you to the first officer of the watch. In any case, it is likely that by the time the letter reaches the person to whom it is addressed, you will have nothing more to fear. So sign it. Caderousse signed. The address. To Monsieur le Baron Danglars, banker, Rue de la Chaussée d'Antin. Caderousse wrote the address. The abbé took the letter. That's good, he said. Now go. Which way? The way you came? Are you asking me to leave by this window? You came in by it. Are you planning something against me, father? You fool! What could I be planning? Then why not open the door to me? What is the point in waking the concierge? Monsieur l'Abbé, tell me that you don't want me dead. I want what God wants. But swear to me that you will not strike me while I am going down. You are an idiot and a coward. What do you want to do with me? I'm asking you. I tried to make you into a happy man, and I only created a murderer. Monsieur l'Abbé, said Caderousse, try one last time. Very well, said the Count. You know I am a man of my word? Yes, said Caderousse. If you return home safe and sound, whom do I have to fear except you? If you return home safe and sound, leave Paris, leave France, and wherever you are, as long as you live an honest life, I shall ensure that you receive a small salary. Because if you get home safe and sound, well then, Caderousse asked, trembling. Well, I shall think that God has pardoned you, and I shall do the same. As true as I'm a Christian, Caderousse stammered, shrinking back. You're scaring me to death. Go, said the Count, pointing to the window. Though still not entirely reassured by the promise, Caderousse climbed out of the window and put his foot on the ladder. There he paused, shivering. Now go down it, said the abbé, folding his arms. Caderousse started to realize that he had nothing to fear from that side, and went down. As he did so, the Count held up the candle, so that from the Champs-Élysées one could see this man coming out of the window, lit by another. But what are you doing, father? Caderousse said. Suppose the watch were to go past. And he blew out the candle. Then he continued to go down the ladder, but it was not until he felt the earth of the garden under his feet that he felt truly secure. Monte Cristo went back into his bedroom and glanced quickly from the garden to the street. First of all he saw Caderousse, after reaching the ground, walk around the garden and place his ladder at the far end of the wall, so as to leave by a different place from the one where he had entered. Then, looking from the garden to the street, he saw the man, who had seemed to be waiting there, run along the street on the far side of the wall and station himself at the very corner near which Caderousse was about to descend. Caderousse slowly climbed the ladder, and reaching the top rungs, put his head above the parapet to make sure that the street was empty. No one was to be seen, no sound to be heard. 1 o'clock struck at the Envalade. At that, Caderousse sat astride the top of the wall, and drawing the ladder up, passed it over to the other side, and prepared to go down, or rather to slide down the 2 uprights, which he did with a degree of skill that proved how accustomed he was to the operation. However, once he had started to let himself slide, he was unable to stop. When he was halfway down, he saw a man dash out of the shadows, but to no avail. He saw an arm raised at the very moment he reached the ground, but to no avail. Before he could defend himself, the arm struck him so savagely in the back that he let go of the ladder, and he cried out, "Help!" A second blow followed almost immediately, striking him in the side, and he fell down, crying, "Murder!" And finally, as he writhed on the ground, his adversary grasped his hair and struck him another blow on the chest. This time, Caderousse tried to cry out again, but could do no more than groan. He groaned, and 3 streams of blood flowed from his 3 stab wounds. The murderer, seeing that he could no longer cry out, lifted his head by the hair. Caderousse's eyes were closed, and his mouth twisted. The murderer, thinking he was dead, let his head fall back and vanished. Caderousse, hearing the footsteps fade in the distance, lifted himself on his elbow, and making one final effort, cried faintly, "Murder! I am dying! Help me, Monsieur l'Abbé!" The mournful cry pierced the darkness. The door to the hidden stairway flew open, then the little door into the garden, and Ali and his master hurried out, carrying lights. Chapter 83. The Hand of God. Caderousse continued to cry out in a pitiful voice, "Monsieur l'Abbé, help me! Help me!" "What's the matter?" asked Monte Cristo. "Help," said Caderousse. "I've been murdered." "We're here, don't worry." "No, it's all over. You've come too late, in time only to see me die. What wounds, what blood!" And he passed out. Ali and his master lifted the wounded man and carried him inside. There Monte Cristo signed to Ali to undress him, and they found the 3 dreadful wounds that had struck him down. "Oh God," said Monte Cristo, "your vengeance may sometimes be slow in coming, but I think that then it is all the more complete." Ali looked at his master, as if to ask what should be done. "Go and find the Crown Prosecutor, Villefort, who lives in the Faubourg Saint-Honoré, and bring him here. On the way, wake up the porter and tell him to go and fetch a doctor." Ali obeyed and left the false abbé alone with Caderousse, who was still unconscious. When the unfortunate man reopened his eyes, the Count, seated a short distance away from him, was giving him a sombre, pious look, his lips moving, apparently muttering a prayer. "A doctor, Monsieur l'Abbé! Fetch a doctor!" said Caderousse. "Someone has already gone for one," said the abbé. "I know that it is too late to save my life, but he might perhaps give me the strength to make my statement." "About what?" "About my murderer." "Do you know who it was?" "Of course I do. Yes, I know him. It was Benedetto." "The young Corsican?" "The same." "Your comrade?" "Yes. After giving me plans of the Count's house, no doubt expecting that I would kill him and so allow Benedetto to inherit, or else that he would kill me and Benedetto would be rid of me, he waited for me in the street and killed me himself." "As well as the doctor, I sent for the Crown Prosecutor." "He will be too late, said Caderousse. "I can feel my life's blood running out." "Wait," said Monte Cristo. He left, then returned 5 minutes later with a flask. While he was away, the dying man, his eyes staring horribly, had not taken them off the door through which he instinctively guessed that help would come. "Hurry, father, hurry," he said. "I feel myself fainting again." Monte Cristo bent down and poured 2 or 3 drops of the liquid in the flask onto the wounded man's purple lips. Caderousse sighed. "Oh, that is life you are giving me. More, more." "Another 2 drops would kill you," the abbé replied. "If only someone would come so that I could denounce the wretch." "Would you like me to write out your statement?" Yes, said Caderousse, his eyes shining at the idea of this posthumous revenge. Monte Cristo wrote, "I die, murdered by the Corsican Benedetto, my fellow prisoner in Toulon under the number 59. "Hurry, hurry," said Caderousse, "or I shall not be able to sign." Monte Cristo gave him the pen, and Caderousse gathered all his strength, signed it, and fell back on the bed, saying, "You can tell them the rest, father. Say that he is calling himself Andrea Cavalcanti, that he is living at the Hôtel de Prince, that... Oh, God! Oh, I am dying!" And once more he fainted. The abbé made him breathe the scent from the flask, and the wounded man opened his eyes. The desire for revenge had not left him while he was unconscious. You will say all that, won't you, father?" "All that and much more." "What more?" "I shall say that he doubtless gave you the plan of this house in the hope that the Count would kill you. I will say that he sent a letter to the Count to warn him, and I shall say that, in the Count's absence, I received this letter and lay in wait for you." "And he will be guillotined, won't he?" said Caderousse. "Promise me he will be guillotined. I die in that hope. It will help me to die." "I shall say," the Count continued, "that he followed you here, that he watched you all the time, and that when he saw you coming out, he ran up and hid behind a corner of the wall." "Did you see all that, then?" "Remember what I said. If you return home safe and sound, I shall believe that God has pardoned you, and I shall do the same." "And you didn't warn me?" Caderousse cried, trying to lift himself on his elbow. "You knew that I would be killed when I left here, and you didn't warn me?" "No, because I saw the hand of Benedetto as the justice of God, and I thought I should be committing a sacrilege if I were to interfere with fate." "The justice of God? Don't speak to me of that, Monsieur l'Abbé. If there was any divine justice, you know as well as anyone that there are people who would be punished but who are not." "Patience," said the abbé, in a tone of voice that made the dying man shudder. "Be patient." Caderousse looked at him in amazement. "And then," the abbé continued, "God is full of mercy for everyone, as he has been towards you. He is a father before he is a judge." "Oh, so you believe in God, do you?" Caderousse asked. "Even if I were so unfortunate as to not have believed in him up to now, I should do so on looking at you." Caderousse raised his clasped hands to heaven. "Listen," the abbé went on, extending a hand above the wounded man as if ordering him to believe. "Here is what he did for you, this God whom you refused to recognize even in your last hour. He gave you health, strength, secure work, and even friends. In short, life as it must appear sweet to a man, offering an easy conscience and the satisfaction of his natural desires. But instead of making use of these gifts of the Lord, which he so rarely grants in all their fullness, what did you do? You abandoned yourself to idleness and drunkenness, and in your drunkenness you betrayed one of your best friends." "Help!" cried Caderousse. It's not a priest I need, but a doctor. Perhaps I am not mortally wounded. Perhaps I am not yet going to die. Perhaps I can be saved." "You are mortally wounded, and so much so that, without the 3 drops of liquid which I gave you just now, you would already be dead. So listen." "Oh," groaned Caderousse, "what a strange priest you are, who puts despair instead of comfort into a dying man's heart." "Listen," the abbé continued. "When you had betrayed your friend, God began not by striking you down, but by warning you. You lapsed into poverty, and you knew hunger. You had spent half a life in envy that you could have spent in profitable toil, and you were already thinking about crime when God offered you a miracle. When God, by my hands, sent you a fortune in the midst of your deprivation, a fortune that was splendid for you, who had never possessed anything. But this unexpected, unhoped-for, unheard-of fortune was not enough for you as soon as you owned it. You wanted to double it. How? By murder. You did double it, and God took it away from you by bringing you to human justice." "I didn't want to kill him," said Caderousse. "It was La Carconte." "Yes," Monte Cristo replied. "So God, who is always, I shall not say just this time, because his justice would have awarded you death, but God, who is always merciful, allowed your judges to be touched by your words and let you live." "Huh! To condemn me to prison for life. A fine pardon that was." "You wretch! You did at least consider it a pardon when it was given." Your cowardly heart, trembling at the prospect of death, leapt with joy at the announcement of your perpetual shame, because, like all convicts, you said to yourself, "Prisons have doors, the tomb has none." You were right, because the door to your prison opened unexpectedly. An Englishman visiting Toulon has made a vow to free 2 men from infamy. He chooses you and your companion. A second fortune drops on you from heaven. You regain both money and ease. and you can once more live the life of other men, after having been condemned to live that of a convict. And at this, you wretch, you begin to tempt God for the third time. I haven't got enough, you say, when you have more than you ever possessed, and you commit a third crime, motiveless, inexcusable. But God has grown tired. He has punished you. Caderousse was weakening visibly. "Water," he said. "I'm thirsty. I'm burning." Monte Cristo gave him a glass of water. "That scoundrel Benedetto," Caderousse said, giving back the glass. "He'll get away with it even so." "No one will escape. I am telling you that, Caderousse. Benedetto will be punished." "Then you too will be punished," said Caderousse, "because you did not do your duty as a priest. You should have stopped Benedetto killing me." "I?" said the Count, with a smile that made the dying man shudder with fear. "I stop Benedetto killing you, just after you had broken your dagger on the mail-coat protecting my chest? Yes, perhaps if I had found you humble and repentant, then I should have stopped Benedetto killing you. But I found you arrogant and bloodthirsty, so I let God's will be done." "I don't believe in God," Caderousse shouted. "Nor do you. You are lying, lying." "Be quiet," said the abbé. "You are urging the last drops of blood out of your body." "Oh, so you don't believe in God, yet you are dying at his hand. So you don't believe in God, yet God only asks for a single prayer, a single word, a single tear to forgive you. God could have guided the murderer's dagger so that you would die immediately, yet he gave you a quarter of an hour to reconsider. So look in your heart, you wretch, and repent." "No," said Caderousse. "No, I do not repent. There is no God, there is no providence, there is only chance." "There is both providence and God," said Monte Cristo. "The proof is that you are lying there, desperate, denying God, and I am standing before you, rich, happy, healthy, and safe, clasping my hands before the God in whom you try not to believe, and in whom, even so, you do believe in the depths of your heart." "But who are you, then?" asked Caderousse, turning his dying eyes towards the Count. "Look carefully at me," Monte Cristo said, taking the candle and putting it next to his face. "Well, the Abbé Busoni." Monte Cristo took off the wig that was disguising his features and let down the fine black hair that so harmoniously framed his pale face. "Oh," Caderousse exclaimed in terror, "if it were not for that black hair, I would take you for the Englishman. I would take you for Lord Wilmore." "I am not Abbé Busoni, or Lord Wilmore," said Monte Cristo. "Look more carefully. Go back further. Look into your earliest memories." These words were spoken by the Count with such a magnetic vibrancy that the man's exhausted senses were awakened for one last time. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I think I did see you. I did know you once." "Yes, Caderousse, you saw me. Yes, you did know me." "Who are you, then? And if you saw me, if you knew me, why are you letting me die?" "Because nothing can save you, Caderousse. Your wounds are mortal. If you could have been saved, I would have seen that as one last act of God's mercy, and I swear it on my father's grave, I should have tried to bring you back to life and to repentance." "On your father's grave?" said Caderousse, fired by one last flickering spark of life, and raising himself to look more closely at this man who had just made an oath sacred to all men. "Who are you, then?" The Count had watched every stage of Caderousse's agony. He realized that this burst of life was the last. He bent over the dying man, and with a look that was both calm and sad, he said, whispering in his ear, "I am," and his lips, barely parting, let fall a name spoken so low that the Count himself seemed to fear the sound of it. Caderousse, who had pulled himself up to his knees, reached out his arms, made an effort to shrink back, then clasped his hands and raised them in one supreme final effort. "Oh God," he said, "oh God, forgive me for denying you. You do indeed exist. You are the Father of men in heaven and their judge on earth. Oh, my Lord, I have long mistaken you. My Lord God, forgive me. My God, my Lord, receive my soul." And closing his eyes, Caderousse fell backwards with a last cry and a final gasp. At once the blood stopped on his lips and ceased to flow from his wounds. He was dead. "One," the Count said mysteriously, staring at the corpse already disfigured by its awful death. 10 minutes later, the doctor and the Crown Prosecutor arrived, the first with the concierge, the other with Ali. They found Abbé Busoni praying beside the body. And that is the end for now.